Kia ora, everyone. Yep. Okay, so I hope you all enjoyed that, Kahoot. We've got some more fun coming up after our next few speakers. So I'd like to now give a warm welcome to Dr. John Williams, who is the Director of the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship. And his research includes consumer behaviour, tourism, business ethics, social marketing, and also how business and societies work together. So I'll hand it over to Dr. John Williams.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou I hoa mā, ko John Williams, toko ingoa, as you've just learned. Quick whakapapa, ko porongia te aroaro o kahu, te maunga, ko Opauro, ko Mangoika, ko Waipā, ko Magapiko na awa, ko Kawhia, te moana, ko Ngāti Hikaro, te iwi, ko Whakamaurangi, te tangata. No reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā katoa. So I know I don't look very brown, but I do hail from Kawhia, which is just south of Raglan, for those of you who don't know Kawhia. So that's where my ancestry lies. Anyhow, so I'm here to tell you about the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship, which is the first new bachelor's degree that's been offered by Otago for over 100 years. So we're quite excited about that. So what I want to do is, I don't plan to take very long. I basically want to run over what makes the degree different and why it's suited to people who want to be entrepreneurs. When we were launching the degree, we carefully considered if a university education was not appealing to some people who wanted to be entrepreneurs, who could benefit from it, but because they are entrepreneurial, they were considering perhaps going to Polytech or maybe not undertaking any tertiary education whatsoever and going straight into the business. So we did consider that aspect of it. And so the design goals of the degree were to make it as useful and practical and flexible as possible. So what I mean by flexible is that if you want to go into a bachelor's degree and you have to, every other bachelor's degree except this one, you have to major in something. So for example, if you want to do a Bachelor of Science and you want to major in physics, there are 13 prescribed papers. So that, I mean, that's a good thing if you want to learn deep knowledge of a particular subject area. Other people, their life goals, they might not want to be particularly specialist in something. They might want a broader knowledge. So that's particularly true of entrepreneurs. So no one actually just wants to be an entrepreneur per se. They want to be entrepreneurial about something. So they might have an idea for sustainability. They might have an idea for farm technology, agricultural technology, for example. So in order to actually launch their business, they have to learn a little bit about, well, how do you launch a business and how do you go from a startup to an actual stable ongoing business. But also, if you want to innovate or just create a new business in food tech, for example, you probably want to learn a bit about food science and perhaps some microbiology and chemistry as well. So we've tried to create the degree, the structure of the degree, so that not only can you learn about entrepreneurship as a subject, but you can also learn about those knowledge areas and skill areas that you want to be entrepreneurial in. So what that means is that there are only 6 prescribed papers as opposed to 13 in physics. So that leaves space free in the degree for students to learn about food technology or agriculture or information and communication technology or data science, which is going to be our next talk. So it leaves space in the degree to learn about all those things. So how it works is that every year there are 2 compulsory entrepreneurship papers. There's 1 per semester. So in the first semester, it's more or less a traditional lecture and tutorial assignment type of university paper. In the second semester, it's what we call field work. And that's where you put the theory that you learned in semester 1 into practice. So every year, theory in semester 1, field work in semester 2. So there's a theory paper in semester 1 in year 1, 2, and 3. There's a fieldwork paper in semester 2 in year 1, 2, and 3. In the fieldwork, in the first year, we get them students to do the Audacious program, which is basically taking students to develop a business idea and go through to actually launching that business if they in fact choose to do that. In year 2, in semester 2, we get students to take part in the Ignite Consultants, which is a student-led business consultant consortium that only takes not-for-profit businesses. So their mission, they have a social mission to help not-for-profits succeed to achieve their goals. So you go from, in year 1, develop your own business, in year 2, help someone else's business. And we're using business in the loosest sense here. So within the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship and also in the Otago Business School, we recognize that not all businesses are profit maximizers. Some are, of course. Some business owners have different goals other than profit maximization, including social goals. They might want to run an organization to achieve some socially desirable outcome. So we want to help with that. We call it the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship. There is also, some of you may be familiar with the term intrapreneurship. So that's innovating within an existing organization. And we know our business school has an advisory board who are made up of the top level business leaders around New Zealand, who are most of whom are graduates of Otago. And what they're telling us is that big businesses know, and medium-sized businesses know, that business as usual isn't cutting it in many situations, and entrepreneurial thinking is actually needed. So even within large organizations, say Fonterra, for example, they really value entrepreneurial thinking. We just call that intrapreneurship. And then there's also a strong focus of the degree of social entrepreneurship, as I've already discussed. So that's 100 level, you work on your own business. 200 level, you help someone else's not-for-profit business. And then at 300 level, we get students to embed in one of the local accelerators or incubators. So there, what you're doing is you're helping lots of other entrepreneurs. So there's that development and basically the more business problems that you're exposed to as a student and trying to help someone as a consultant, the deeper understanding you get of the realities of entrepreneurship. So that's the basic plan. So there's 6 compulsory papers, 3 theory, 3 fieldwork, and then at 300 level, students have to do 2 additional papers from a list of 8 papers. So ranging from understanding ecological issues to new product development. So there's an option there for a wide range of tastes and interests. So I mentioned at the start, if you do a BA or a BCom or a BSc, you have to major in something. In the BEntre, you don't have to major in anything. So that's the reason why we made that choice, is to make the degree maximally flexible. You can take a major if you want to, but it's optional. The BEntre, although it's housed in the Otago Business School, we think of it as not being a commerce degree, but basically being a university-wide degree. So you can actually take a major. You can enroll in the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship and major in biochemistry if you wanted to, or food science, or geography, or geology. whatever you want to innovate in and be entrepreneurial in, that domain, that subject domain area. We want to leave space not only for students to learn, but actually to gain some sort of recognised qualification. So you can say in their academic transcript, they can say that they majored in food science, for example. Another design goal and fundamental principle when we're constructing the degree was honouring the treaty. In the business school, we have associate dean, academic deans that cover Māori and Pacific, and the academic deans Māori and Pacific were heavily involved with creating the degree and remain as academic oversight. So because it's a new degree, we're examining very closely how it's going and if it's succeeding in its goals. Another one of the goals, which is a little unusual, is we really want to develop students as individuals, develop their personal qualities vis-a-vis entrepreneurship. So one of the people who are the academic leads in developing the degree is Professor Nathan Berg. He's the Dunedin City Council Chair in entrepreneurship. So he's developed a psychometric tool called ECAT to measure individuals' entrepreneurial capital. And that's been, ECAT has been used by various organisations and ministries in New Zealand. So what we plan to do is when students enrol in their first year, we give them that ECAT questionnaire, and then we retest them as they go on to see, that's one way we can see if we're achieving our aims of developing the students as individuals, rather than testing their knowledge, what the knowledge and skills they've picked up. And I see there's a question in the chat. I'll get to that in a little bit. So we've got the Māori, Pacific and other Indigenous perspectives are kind of baked into the degree, into the topics we teach and the way that we teach them. And also the practical focus of the degree. So field work and putting theory into practice. And so those two perspectives on teaching and learning, I suppose, they give rise to another phenomenon or another aspect of the degree. There's no exams. We don't have any exams. So we're not so much about getting students to regurgitate information, although university exams don't only do that. We try to assess understanding, obviously, but to developing skills and developing entrepreneurial capital. So a key aspect of entrepreneurial capital is pitching, for example. So the ability to confidently interact, to ask for money and to back up your claims. So this is, we have similar tasks over the course of a paper and also the course of the degree. So if you think about coaching and developing a student as a sport, in a sport, for example, you can't give someone coaching tips and then see how they run down the track or throw a shot put or something and that's it. It's continual practice. So that continual practice and coaching is really built into how we've structured the assessment of the degree. So the topics we teach, how we assess them, and how we teach those particular topics. I think that I've got a list of things. I'm a very forgetful person. So I've got a list of things that I wanted to cover. That's pretty much all of them, I think. So I can get on to answering the question. So there's a question in the chat, would it be helpful for students who are seeking a sports contract? Sure. We think the degree would be helpful for anything where students want to develop a business, including their own personal brand. We don't actually, so in the marketing department where I work, we do have a sport marketing paper and personal branding. So this sports person as a brand is an element of that. We aim to, so we aim to be, as I say, as open as possible. So pretty much anything that you can study at university, you can include in your Bachelor of Entrepreneurship degree. And any major that you can get at Otago University, you can actually include that. Okay, that's pretty much all I want to say. I've got a lecture at noon, so I can hang around for another 5 or 10 minutes. So are there any questions or comments or feedback? Do you have some examples of current student projects? No, we don't actually. Well, I'm the administrator of the entire degree. I don't actually teach a significant portion of any of the papers. I did, because I'm work in the marketing department, I gave 2 lectures on marketing for Entre 101. So the first year paper is still ongoing. If you're actually interested, I can obtain that list from our course leader. So as an example of our commitment to Te Tiriti, we actually specifically hired a Māori academic to teach the first year papers. His name's Morgan Godfrey, and he's an amazing person. We're very, very lucky to have him. So I'll get a hold of Morgan and see if I can share that list with you.
Thank you, John. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. So, obviously, with course planning, we had lots of students interested in entrepreneurship, and because it's in its first year, are you able to give us some idea of how many students you've got in the program this year?
Yep, just over 100. Which exceeded our wildest dreams. We were planning for about 40. About half of those are Bachelor of Entrepreneurship students. Excuse me a moment. Just recovering from the flu. Half are enrolled in the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship, and the other half are enrolled in other bachelor's degrees, and they just think Entre 101 looks like a good paper to include in their degree. And actually, as we're coming, this is the second last week of the semester, I've had a trickle of inquiries from students who want to change from a BSc to a B-Entre. So they've enrolled in Entre 101, or they've got a friend who's taken the paper. Yeah. And so that's administratively very tricky. But our whole ethos is flexibility and not putting artificial barriers in the way.
Awesome. And I must say that's been feedback, from students and parents. They love the flexibility of the degree.
Fantastic.
So that's really good to hear, because we weren't too sure. I remember you telling us only 40 spaces, but we knew you'd get a few more numbers than that. Also, just another one, just in regards to your, how you talked about the theory and practical papers. Mm-hmm. Are there existing relationships with organisations in Dunedin community, with businesses that?
Absolutely. So we try and make sure we can deliver what we promise. So we do have memorandums of understanding with some of the local, not all, but most of the local innovators. Incubators and accelerators here in Dunedin under the Startup Dunedin umbrella. They've agreed to take our students. It looks like we're going to end up with more than they agreed to take, but they've agreed that in principle they can work with that. One thing I forgot to mention actually is that at each of the years, so we've got year 1 Audacious, year 2 Ignite, year 3 Embedding in an Incubator. If at any stage a student can make a case to me that they don't need that, and they've got another context or situation where they can put into practice what they've learnt in the first semester, we're certainly willing to accommodate that. So that's particularly relevant for the secondary school students who've completed the YES program. So that is very similar to Audacious. And actually, of the 100 students that are 100-ish, 103, I think, students that are enrolled, about 6 have actually launched their own business. They are actually running their own business, which they developed from the YES program. So Audacious is kind of pointless for them. So we're going to try and work out something where they can meaningfully show that they've learnt the principles in semester 1 and can apply them in their own business.
Awesome, thank you. And just one last question here. Are you looking to cap numbers in the first year if it continues to grow?
We might have to. Staffing is an issue, to be brutally honest. And it may be that we may have to, but we're going to avoid that for as long as humanly possible. Basically, if our numbers grow, we can make a business case to hire new staff. So it's a, sort of a, yes, it's a, yeah, I can't say much more than that. Really.
No, that's awesome. It's a good thing. It's a good problem to have if we're getting more numbers. So yeah.
Yes, that's what we say.
And good students interested in studying that. So no, if there's no more questions, I'll leave it there because you've got to run to your lecture. So thank you for your time. It was very interesting. And yeah.
You're welcome. Kia ora koutou.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, so now moving along, we've got about another 20 minutes left. So I just wanted to introduce our next speaker, Associate Professor Tony Savarimuthu. I hope I've said that right, Tony. Just a little bit of background. Tony lectures and also coordinates the Computer 101 paper, which is the introductory paper in information science. And his background is working as a software engineer and also a lecturer. So welcome, Tony. Thank you. I'll pass it over to you.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Therese. Hello from me. I'm Tony, and I am an associate professor, as Therese said, the Department of Information Science. And I'm originally from India, and I moved to Dunedin 20 years ago to do my PhD. And I thought I'll be here for 3 years. And the 3 years have now grown to 20 years. I really love being in Dunedin and also doing research and publishing. So today I'm going to talk about the new minor that's being offered at the business school, which is the business analytics minor. But before we talk about the minor, I briefly wanted to say a few things about my research, because I'm passionate about my research, and it directly links to the kind of activities we do in the data science domain. So I conduct research in a couple of domains. One is multi-agent systems, which is a branch of distributed artificial intelligence, and the other branch is software engineering. You might wonder, what does these branches have to do with data science? Hang on a minute, I will tell you. So what is agent? An agent is a piece of software that can actually reside in embedded systems like robotic systems and virtual worlds. And I'm more interested in the social aspect of these systems. How can we actually make these robotic systems collaborate, virtual avatars collaborate with each other, and so on. And in software engineering, I'm interested in social aspects of software engineering, such as decision-making systems, and also investigating whether software developers really have a life, because some of you might know software developers can work for a long period of time. Are they really disconnecting themselves from work and having a really meaningful life or not? So we look at, for example, their Twitter feed to find out whether they actually talk about work, or are they really socializing with other people. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to link my research areas to the data science umbrella, which is the larger umbrella of what I'm going to talk about. So a couple of examples from my own research on analytics. Then I'm going to pose you a question, because I've been asked to make it as interactive as possible. So I'll pose you a very brief question. It will be easy one, I promise. And then I'm going to talk about the business analytics minor, and you can ask me questions. So when you look at this particular picture, you could see a couple of robots, and I'm actually passionate about creating software for these robots, where the goal is to make them socially capable. So when you look at this picture, you could actually see there are quite a few social norms in action. So you can see one robot gazes at the other robot. And in human systems, when we actually talk to somebody, we don't constantly stare at each other. We look at somebody for a certain amount of time, and then we turn our gaze somewhere else. So there is a gaze norm here, right? How does this robot know how long it should actually look at the other person in the eye? And it also is actually shaking the hand, right? So the handshake is just a cultural norm in the Western societies. But if you're like me from India, you would say namaste or vanakkam, or if you're from China, you bow. So the norms change, and you may also observe there is an interpersonal distance between these two robots. So the main thing I want to bring up here is the robots have to learn from humans, and in my research, we are interested in learning social norms, socially acceptable behavior, and this comes from learning from humans. So these robots are highly perceptive. They can actually look at the environment. When you're speaking to each other, we only focus on the other person, but these robots can actually look at the whole room and learn from whole heap of people in the room. So not just from one other robot. So here, I'm interested in learning from humans. So it's learning from data. There's a lot of data that comes into a robot, and I'm interested in learning social behavior. And this becomes very important in the context of human robot teams. So nowadays, there are lots of, for example, firefighting is a common example where robots and humans work together. And these robots shouldn't ask how to behave to a human all the time. They should learn it automatically. So that comes from huge amounts of data. The second example from my own research is checking for process compliance. So process compliance is about checking whether certain processes that organizations say that they follow is actually being conformed to. So this is a process on the left. This is an advertised process that is shown to be useful. This is the advertised process in the Python language development. When people want to develop the Python language, it's developed in a distributed manner. And when somebody wants to create a new functionality, they create a document. The document goes through this process. Initially, the feature is it's advertised as a draft, and then it gets accepted by several people, and then finally it gets implemented. So this is the process that they say that they follow. But when we look at the real data, it's quite complex. So what you can see on the right is the actual process. You can see it is much more complicated. So this again is an example where we can look at the data that is present, and then you can check whether the advertised process is in fact the actual process. So what we found was the actual process is much more complicated. So this again comes from a data-driven perspective. So if we look at the real data tells us things are slightly different. So another example is driverless cars. When you think of cars, these cars do only three things. The cars can accelerate, the cars can brake, and they can turn. So to do these three things, they use a huge amount of data from video cameras, the GPS, the LiDAR system, and they track each of the other cars in the other lanes uniquely to make these three simple decisions: turning, braking, and accelerating. So now I have a question. So what's common to these three examples that I've presented? So if you can actually use your the chat system to post answers. So I'll give you 15 seconds. It's not a tricky question. So what do these three examples have in common? Okay, people learning from humans, data input is needed. Yes, those are all good answers. Yes, we had to learn from process or information, human required input. So those are all Very good answers. So my answer is all these three examples require huge amounts of data, and it involves certain form of analytics. So there is an underlying analytics program or some analytics method or technique that's actually used to infer insights from data. So that forms the nice segue to what I want to present, which is the new minor, which is going to be introduced in 2023, which is on business analytics. So business analytics focuses on a specific aspect of analytics. So analytics is a broad subject, and data analytics is the common broad umbrella. But in business analytics, we are interested in inferring insights from business data. So the examples, the three examples that I gave are all examples of business analytics. So the motivation for this minor comes from businesses gaining lots of data. So the last 10 to 15 years, organizations are collecting huge amounts of information from their customers, suppliers, products, processes, and so on. And you would have heard about this term called big data, which means huge amounts of data in petabytes and zettabytes. And this was popularized by this article in The Economist, which talked about the data deluge, the flooding of data. And not all data would be useful. We need to do some meaningful processing to get the golden nuggets. So, in this particular picture, the plant is growing because of this golden nugget or the key insights that can be inferred from the data. So all of this data needs to be processed, and there is a lot of demand for analytics, both globally and in the New Zealand context. So one thing I want to highlight is this third quote, which comes from Infometrics. Infometrics are all the time in the news, and they have noted that it is important for commerce graduates in particular to have extensive analytic skills. So it's not just sufficient for them to have just data literacy. They want graduates that have extensive analytic skills. And this particular minor aims to bridge that gap. And you may wonder, what does analytics involve? Sorry for turning this into Analytics 101, but I thought it'd be good to hear a few things about what analytics is all about. It's about this particular pipeline that I've shown in this graph. Typically, huge amounts of data is available. The first step involves the importing of the data, bringing up the data into a particular platform. This could be Excel, it could be, in the modern context, it could be the R programming language or a Python programming language. So we import the data, and the data is often unclean. It's noisy data, so we need to tidy the data. Then we do some transformation. This is the slicing and dicing of data, transformation of data. And then we look at visualizing the data into the graphs, the various form of graphs, bar charts, trend lines, and so on. And at the heart of analytics lies this model building. So model building is a key component of analytics, where we create predictive models. For example, whether a loan will be approved or not, or whether can we detect diabetes in the early stages. So those all involve creating some mathematical or statistical models. And often this is an iterative process. Once we build a good model, then that model results can be communicated to various stakeholders. And very briefly, there are these three types of analytics, which we cover as a part of this minor: descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. So descriptive is all about looking at historical data and identifying various trends. For example, the trend here shows the sales was weak in March. So these are based on past data.
Predictive, about like those things in the notices about like
the predictive analytics is all about forward-looking. Can we actually predict something?
Okay, so you need to go and see Fire Donna. So down the hallway and turn right.
Sorry, can you please mute yourself? Everybody
sorry,
on mute?
that's me. Sorry.
Okay, these things happened.
My apologies.
Back
Sorry,
to you,
everybody.
Tony.
No, that's okay. And the third type is the prescriptive analytics. And so this diagram nicely summarizes the continuum of analytics. So the easiest thing to do is the descriptive analytics. So I'm sure all of us here would have created bar charts and line charts, right? So that's actually looking at past data and creating visualizations. But the difficulty level increases as we move to predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics. So predictive analytics is all about what will happen in the future, and prescriptive is all about looking at a slightly distant future, and then creating pathways to achieve a particular goal. Okay, so the descriptive analytics might tell us, okay, the sales is low, and then diagnostic analytics can tell us the reason for why the sales is low. For example, COVID is a very good reason, right? We can actually again create a chart that shows COVID versus no COVID scenario. COVID is a reason for the lower sales. And predictive analytics is all about, can we actually now predict what our sales will look like in a year's time or in 6 months' time with and without COVID scenarios. And prescriptive analytics is actually looking into the future, saying, if you want to achieve 50% increase in sales, what are the different pathways and what is the best pathway to achieve a particular goal? Okay. So I won't go into a lot of detail because it can be laborious. So one good example of predictive analytics is loan processing. And I think most of us would have been in a situation where we have applied for a loan, home loan, personal loan. But an interesting fact is that most loans are not processed by humans. It's processed by an analytics program. It's often a machine learning program. And that program is an algorithm that takes a huge amount of information about individuals, the age, gender, education, income, and so on. And then it builds a prediction model based on past data about customers. So it creates a mathematical model. And when we apply for a loan, that program takes in our data and then makes a prediction. So whether to approve the loan or not. And this prediction is given to a human who relays that information. So it's actually a scary proposition that nowadays most decisions in many organizations are created by this analytics program. But there is a lot of research that goes in the creation of these analytics programs so that they are not biased. For example, there's a lot of work that shows there is bias across races. For example, there are algorithms that can be racist, for example. So there's a huge amount of research that goes in the predictive analytics field. And moving beyond predictive analytics is the prescriptive analytics, where we can actually prescribe a solution. So I won't go over all these examples. I'll just take one example, which is customer churn prevention. So organizations do not want their customers to leave. They want customers to be with them. So the first step to prevent these churn is to identify customers who are at risk in leaving an organization. They might not be using a product, or they might go to a competitor. So there are these analytics programs that can actually identify key people who might be at risk of leaving a particular product or a service. For example, they might not be using a product, or they may be using it at a lower frequency, or they may be posting negative feedback through reviews, right? Online reviews. So these analytics programs can look at all of that and predict somebody's going to leave, and then they can prescribe what strategies might best suit that particular individual, what incentives to offer, what perks to offer, so that they can prevent that customer from leaving. So I wouldn't go into any of the other examples. I find the other examples fascinating as well, but I'll spare that this time around. So business analytics minor will cover all these different areas of analytics. So the key thing I want you to take away is there is huge amounts of data, and there are lots of analytics techniques, and the most complex one would be the prescriptive analytics, and that's becoming a hot area in the modern business context. So quickly touching upon the structure of the minor, what I wanted to focus on is there are 5 papers as a part of the minor. The ones in green are the compulsory ones at the bottom. So in these 3 papers, the students will learn about the different types of analytics techniques. So the techniques are taught in these 3 papers. Once they have covered these 3 papers, then they can actually go and specialize in a particular commerce domain. It could be in accounting, or it could be in finance, or it could be in economics, and so on. So what this program allows is, it allows the students to learn the techniques, and then it allows them to apply in a particular domain of their major. So accounting students can take the accounting pathway, finance students can take the finance pathway, economic students can take the economics pathway, and so on. So we have not covered all the different pathways. So that's work in progress. We are hoping in the future there will be specialized papers in other areas of commerce as well. So the target audience for this minor is BCom majors, but of course other students from outside commerce can also take this minor. So what are the highlights of this minor? This minor goes through the entire data science workflow. So once they have learned about the workflow, they can apply this workflow for any domain. So that's actually the neat aspect of the data science pathway. So once you have learned the workflow, you can pretty much apply to any discipline. But having said that, there are certain techniques that are applied in specialized commerce fields. For example, in time series modeling is often used in finance and accounting, right? Mostly in finance. So you will, in the courses that you take in the financial analytics side of things, you'll specialize in those set of models. So this minor enables both specialization and diversification. What I mean by that is, if you're an accounting major, then this minor allows you to specialize in accounting analytics. So that's a specialization. What I mean by diversification is, if you're a marketing major, you can still diversify yourself in financial analytics by taking appropriate papers in financial analytics side of things. But I would think the most common pathway would be the specialization side of things, where you specialize in the context of your major. So the main career opportunity for students who are taking this minor is the data analyst pathway or the business intelligence pathway, where students can become, accounting analysts or financial analysts or marketing analysts. So these are typically students who have a major in a particular field like accounting, and they specialize in analyzing data in the accounting context. But there are also more specialized roles like customer relationship management analyst, social media analyst, and human resources analyst, and so on. So what is the suitability of students? What kind of students would be interested? I would think anyone who's interested in data, like finding patterns. If they're interested in finding patterns in data, this would be a good minor for them. And they should also be not afraid of computing. So they don't have to be the stereotype nerds in computing, but as long as they're not afraid, this is actually a good pathway for them to pursue. And we don't expect any special preparation at school at all. This is mainly because we give them all the foundational material as a part of the package that we offer. But if they have some stats background or computing background, that would be a recommended preparation, but it's not absolutely required. Okay. So finally, I would like to leave you with this quote from Jeffrey Moore. I think this nicely summarizes what analytics is all about. So it says, without big data analytics, companies are blind and deaf, wandering out onto the web like a deer on a freeway. So I would think this will become a necessity for most commerce students. And I'm hoping that you as the school liaison people and the careers advisors would advise them to actually take up this minor. And I would think this will really strengthen their career opportunities. Okay? So with that, I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you. Sorry, that was a very quick whirlwind tour of what I wanted to cover. Hopefully the Analytics 101 was not too boring. I hope you got something out of it. I just wanted to relay that there is depth in analytics. There is a continuum, right? So you start shallow and then you go really deep. That's where the predictive and prescriptive analytics comes into play. Okay. So thank you.
Thanks, Tony. I found it really interesting. It's Karen from Schools Liaison here.
Hi,
What I
Karen.
found most fascinating was how it can apply to so many different areas. Are you expecting students that are doing like science degrees to do the business analytics minor?
So that's a very good question. I actually do not know what is going to happen, but my hope is that, you know, it's a subset of analytics. As you may know, there is a data science program, which is a major in sciences. So this would be a nice supplement to commerce students. So it's mainly targeted commerce students, but the three basic papers that form the core of the business analytics minor, you know, anyone can benefit from it. As long as the science majors are interested in learning some part of business, then it will be suitable for them. But if they don't have any interest in business subjects at all, then I don't think it's going to be attractive, because as you may see in one of the slides, there are two papers that they must take from the business core, in the sense that, you know, they had to specialize in a particular business domain. It could be accounting, it could be marketing. So as long as they're interested in a business domain, then it's going to be beneficial for them. But I'm hoping that there'll be sciences students who actually take up this minor as well.
Awesome, thanks.
So are there any other questions? We've got some lovely comments in the chat there, Tony. I have to say, jeepers. When I first saw that I was going to be learning about business analytics, I thought, far out, okie dokie, because it's got my two favourite things, computers and maths. But actually, you made it make sense. I really loved your style by giving the actual personal examples. And I'm a great fan of charts. I loved those, particularly those two charts that showed the process. So I really feel quite confident now that if I meet any young people who, you know, in my background conversation with them, I go, oh, actually, maybe this would be a good thing for you to look at, to explore, that I could confidently talk about it. So thank you for that. I just found that so interesting. I was like, oh, you know, particularly the, you know, the real life examples. I thought that was great. So thank you for your clarifications. I also, an absentia, because I think that John's gone off to his lecture, but I also found that so interesting, and that I've met those students right from the start. We all have, I know, in schools and schools liaison, who, as soon as you started talking about the flexibility, the opportunity to build in subject-based knowledge, and many of them already had their own businesses or business ideas, or as John mentioned, their desire for social change and how do I do that, either alongside my real life or within an existing organisation. So I would like to thank him as well for his really good explanation of what's available for our students in that space. So we're going to move now, I think, to a break, and we're